Hello. Tonight we gently turn back time, returning to a very distant moment, when the world was quiet in a way you may have never truly experienced. You walk slowly across a vast plain where a river winds like a soft ribbon, quietly reflecting a sky fading into the colors of dusk. There is no noise from traffic, no artificial lights, and honestly, if you stayed here for a few days, you probably wouldn't survive. So, before you get completely comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly enjoy what we're creating here. And if you feel like it, leave a small comment sharing where you're listening from, along with your local time. Maybe it's a quiet room at midnight or a late afternoon filled with soft sunlight. Wherever you are, this story will gently find its way to you. Now, slowly dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan, letting the steady hum of the air fill the room. And in that gentle rhythm, we quietly step into tonight's journey together. You walk slowly along the riverbank, and the ground beneath your feet feels soft, almost as if it remembers every step taken before yours. The air is cool, carrying the scent of water and distant trees, and somewhere far away, a bird calls once, then falls silent again. Everything moves in a rhythm that does not rush, and you begin to notice how time here feels wider, like a long breath that never quite ends. You look around, and what you see is not a place divided or measured, but a place simply existing. There are no fences, no markers pressed into the soil, and no signs that say where something begins or ends. The land stretches gently in all directions, like an open thought that no one has tried to contain. It is not empty, but it is free in a way that feels almost unfamiliar. The river beside you flows at a steady pace, shaped by seasons rather than decisions. During certain times of the year, it rises quietly and spreads across the plains, leaving behind a thin layer of rich soil. This natural rhythm, repeated over countless years, has made this land fertile without effort, as if the earth itself is quietly doing the work, while everyone else simply watches. In the distance, you notice small groups of people moving slowly across the landscape. They are not gathered in large numbers, and they do not seem to stay in one place for long. Instead, they follow patterns that are older than memory, moving with the water, with the animals, and with the changing seasons. If modern life feels like a calendar full of deadlines, their lives feel more like a playlist on shuffle that somehow always works. You approach one of these groups, and you see how they live. Their shelters are simple, made from branches, hides, and whatever materials the land offers at the moment. Nothing here is built to last forever, and nothing needs to be. When the river shifts or the food becomes scarce, they simply gather their belongings and move on, leaving almost no trace behind. There is no word here for ownership in the way you understand it. The land is not something to possess, but something to move through, like air or light. You begin to realize that the idea of saying, "This is mine," has not yet taken shape. It is not forbidden, and it is not resisted. It simply has not appeared. Yet, like a thought waiting quietly somewhere in the distance, among the people, there are those who are listened to more carefully. Older individuals, whose memories stretch further back, carry stories and knowledge about where to go and when to leave. They do not rule, and they do not command. Instead, their influence feels like a gentle current, guiding rather than forcing, much like the river that shapes the land without ever raising its voice. There are no borders to defend, and because of that, there are no wars to fight over territory. Conflicts, when they happen, are small and brief, often fading as quickly as they appear. Without something fixed to hold on to, there is little reason to clash in ways that last. It is a quiet kind of balance, one that exists not because it is enforced, but because it has never been broken. As you continue walking, you begin to notice how the land and the people seem to belong to the same rhythm. The grass bends with the wind, the river follows its path, and the people move in response. To both, nothing feels separate and nothing feels claimed. It is as if everything here exists in a shared agreement that no one has ever spoken aloud. Anthropologists today often describe this way of living as part of the late Paleolithic period, when most human societies moved gently across the land. As hunter-gatherers, instead of settling in one place, you would follow seasonal rhythms, guided by water, animals, and weather. Daily life felt less like planning and more like listening, almost as if the land itself quietly suggested where you should go next, like an ancient natural compass. Archaeological discoveries from sites such as Göbekli Tepe, built more than 11,000 years ago, reveal something quietly remarkable. Even before permanent settlements fully took shape, people were already coming together in shared spaces, creating meaning beyond survival. It suggests that connection, purpose, and even early forms of structure existed without ownership, without walls, and without borders, like a gathering that simply formed because people felt drawn to it. You pause for a moment and look across the open land again. The horizon stretches endlessly, untouched by lines or divisions. It feels calm, almost impossibly calm, like a world before questions were asked. And yet, somewhere beneath this stillness, something is slowly forming, though you cannot quite see it yet. For now, the land remains as it is, open, shared, and unclaimed. And in this gentle stillness, nothing feels urgent, and nothing feels owned. And perhaps, in a quiet way, that is exactly how everything is meant to be. At least for now. You continue walking across the open land, and after a while, you begin to notice something that feels both simple and deeply unfamiliar. The people here do not gather into one place, and they do not build anything that draws everyone together. Instead, they exist in small, scattered groups, each one moving gently across the landscape, like clouds drifting without ever needing to meet in the same sky at once. And yet, despite the distance between them, they are not truly separate. You begin to see how these groups remain quietly connected, not through roads or written messages, but through memory. A path remembered from a previous season. A river bend recognized after many years. A place where someone once shared food or told a story that stayed longer than the fire it was told beside. In a way, their connection feels like an invisible thread, soft and flexible, but never completely breaking. There is no central place where decisions are made. No leader sits above the others, and no voice carries farther simply because of power. Instead, everything flows through habit, through repetition, through a shared understanding that is formed over time. It feels less like a system and more like a rhythm that everyone somehow knows without needing to be taught, like humming a tune you did not realize you remembered. If you were to look for authority here, you might notice that certain individuals are listened to more carefully. These are often the older ones, those who have seen more seasons pass, who remember where the river once flooded or where food was found during a dry year. But even then, their guidance is not enforced. It is offered gently and followed because it feels right, not because it must be done in modern terms. Anthropologists often describe societies like this as egalitarian bands, a form of social organization common during the Paleolithic era. Evidence from sites such as Dolní Věstonice, dating back around 30,000 years in what is now the Czech Republic, shows that these communities lived without clear hierarchies. Burials and artifacts suggest subtle differences, but not the kind of rigid structure that would later define kingdoms or states. It is a quiet kind of balance, one that does not rely on control. As you move between these groups, you begin to notice something else. There is a remarkable sense of flexibility in the way they live. If one area becomes less generous, they move. If another place offers more, they stay a little longer. Nothing holds them in place, and because of that, nothing traps them either. It is a way of living that bends rather than breaks, like grass swaying under the wind instead of resisting it. You might even find yourself thinking that, in some ways, this life is simpler than your own. There are no crowded schedules, no endless notifications, and no need to remember passwords, which is honestly a relief considering how often those get forgotten. Life here is immediate, shaped by what is present rather than what is planned far ahead. And because there is no fixed ownership of land, there is very little reason for large conflicts to emerge. There is nothing to defend in the way you might expect, no borders to guard, no territory marked as something that must be held at all costs. Disagreements may still happen, as they do anywhere humans exist, but they tend to remain small, fading as people move apart, rather than escalating into something larger. However, as you continue observing, you begin to sense that this quiet strength also carries a quiet limitation. Without a central structure, there is no coordinated defense. If danger comes, each group responds on its own. There is no gathering of forces, no unified strategy, only the instinct to move, to avoid, to adapt. It works most of the time, but it leaves them open in ways that are not immediately visible. And then there is something far more subtle, a quiet understanding that transcends struggle or desire. It is not about clinging, defending, or holding on to a place, a title, or a moment. Instead, it is the gentle flow of presence, the freedom in letting go, and simply being. The land is familiar, yes. It is remembered, revisited, and respected. But it is not claimed. No one stays to say, "This must remain ours." Instead, they pass through it, again and again, like travelers returning to a place they love, but never thinking to lock the door behind them. That you begin to realize that this way of living depends entirely on movement. It survives because nothing is fixed. But because nothing is fixed, nothing can be firmly protected, either. At certain times of the year, these groups cross paths. You can imagine a moment when two groups approach the same river from different directions, each one arriving after its own long journey. There is a pause, a recognition, and then a gentle merging of presence. They share food, exchange tools, and most importantly, tell stories. Stories about where they have been, what they have seen, and what might lie ahead. These gatherings are not scheduled, and they are not planned. They simply happen, like two currents meeting in the same bend of a river. And when the time feels right, they separate again, each group continuing along its own path, leaving behind no markers, no claims, and no signs that they were ever there. It is a kind of relationship that feels almost impossible in a world filled with permanent structures and fixed locations. Here, connection does not require staying. It exists even as people move apart, carried forward through memory, rather than maintained through proximity. As the light begins to soften and the air grows cooler, you find yourself standing once again in the open space between these groups. The land stretches out, unchanged, untouched by division. There are no lines drawn across it, no invisible borders that dictate where one life ends and another begins. It is, in many ways, a world without edges. And yet, as peaceful as it feels, you begin to understand something quiet beneath that peace. There is nothing here to protect. No walls to guard, no boundaries to defend, no place that must remain. It is a world without borders, and also a world without anything to hold on to. You continue your quiet journey across the open land, and at first, everything feels unchanged. The river still moves with its steady rhythm, and the wind still passes gently through the tall grass. But as you look more carefully, you begin to notice something subtle, something that does not disturb the surface, yet quietly shifts what lies beneath it. In the distance, you see another group of people, but they feel different in a way that is difficult to explain at first. They are more numerous, their presence more concentrated, and instead of moving lightly across the land, they seem to linger. Their shelters are not as temporary as the ones you saw before, and their movements appear slower, more deliberate, as if they are beginning to stay. You walk a little closer, and you begin to notice small patches of earth that have been carefully disturbed. The ground is not simply walked upon, but worked. Seeds have been placed into the soil, and in time, something has grown from them. It is a quiet beginning, almost easy to miss, but it changes everything in ways that will only become clear much later. This is one of the earliest shifts that archaeologists associate with the Neolithic transition, when certain human groups began to cultivate plants rather than rely entirely on gathering. Evidence from the Fertile Crescent, around 10,000 BCE, shows that early communities started growing wheat and barley, gradually settling near rivers where the soil was rich and the water dependable. It was not a sudden change, but a slow turning. Because of this new way of living, these groups begin to stay longer in one place. Their shelters become more stable, their routines more predictable. You can sense a different rhythm here, one that feels less like wandering and more like waiting. Waiting for crops to grow, for seasons to pass, for the land to respond to their care. As you observe them, you begin to understand that their numbers are also growing. When people remain in one place, food can be produced more consistently, and with that consistency comes the possibility of supporting more lives. Children grow up in the same place where they were born, and over time, the group becomes larger, more rooted, more present. With more people, however, comes a quiet pressure. The need for food becomes more constant, less flexible. It is no longer enough to simply move when resources become scarce. Now, there is an expectation that the land itself will provide again and again. This expectation settles gently into their way of thinking, like a habit that forms without being noticed. You begin to see that not all land is equal anymore. Some areas, especially those close to rivers or with fertile soil, become more valuable than others. These places can support crops, sustain larger groups, and offer a sense of stability that wandering cannot always guarantee. Meanwhile, other areas remain less desirable, less reliable, quietly fading into the background of importance. It is a small shift in perception, but a powerful one. For the first time, the land is no longer just a place to move through. It begins to feel like something that can be depended on, something that can be returned to with expectation rather than hope. And when something becomes dependable, it also begins to feel important. You notice how these people return to the same locations, season after season. Their footsteps overlap with their own past, creating patterns that slowly deepen over time. What was once a temporary stop becomes a familiar place, and what was familiar begins to feel meaningful. There is still no clear claim, no spoken declaration that this land belongs to them. But there is something quieter forming beneath the surface. A sense of connection that grows not from ownership, but from repetition. From staying just a little longer each time. If you were to describe this feeling in modern terms, it might resemble the way you begin to care about a place, simply because you have spent time there. Like returning to the same cafe again and again, until one day it feels like yours, even though it never truly is. And perhaps you even have a favorite seat that you secretly hope no one else takes. This subtle attachment begins to change behavior in small ways. You might notice how they tend to remain closer to their cultivated land, how they watch over it, how they return to check on it. It is not yet protection, not yet defense, but it is attention. And attention, given long enough, has a way of turning into something stronger. At the same time, other groups continue to move as they always have, passing through the land without staying. When these moving groups encounter those who have begun to settle, there is a moment of quiet difference. No conflict, no confrontation, just a subtle awareness that their ways of living are no longer the same. Archaeological evidence from Jericho, one of the oldest known continuously inhabited settlements, suggests that by around 9000 BCE, some communities had already begun building more permanent structures. Even early forms of walls have been discovered there, though their exact purpose remains debated. It is a gentle hint that the idea of staying, and perhaps protecting, was beginning to take shape. As the sun lowers slowly in the sky, you feel the weight of this quiet transformation. Nothing dramatic has happened. No lines have been drawn, no battles have been fought. And yet, the world is no longer exactly as it was before. The stillness remains, but beneath it, something has shifted, like a current moving under calm water, that you take one final look at the land, at the people who move and those who remain, and slowly a new idea begins to form within you, quiet and unspoken, still searching for its voice. It starts in the simplest way, by staying a little longer, by allowing presence to settle, and noticing the subtle shifts around you. And staying longer slowly turns into growing closer. Growing closer begins to feel like something precious, something worth holding on to. A small, delicate thought has quietly taken root within. So light, so gentle, yet persistent. Though subtle, it lingers, unshaken, refusing to fade, quietly shaping the heart without demanding attention. You wander across the fertile plains, eyes tracing the subtle shifts of sunlight on the earth. Certain stretches of land along the winding river seem to hum with quiet importance, as if aware of their own role in sustaining life. Water flows with gentle consistency here, nourishing reeds, small animals, and the occasional cluster of wildflowers. The land seems to promise stability in a way the surrounding fields cannot, quietly inviting life to settle, pause, and grow along its banks. Over time, faint paths emerge, not carved by rulers, but worn naturally by repeated footsteps. Travelers begin recognizing these gentle trails, returning season after season, exchanging stories, goods, and advice. A bend in the river becomes a familiar meeting point, while nearby meadows offer space to rest, forage, or observe the world. Even the quietest paths carry a rhythm, an unspoken understanding among wanderers that some stretches of earth are quietly, inherently more valuable than others. You imagine small groups pausing beside the river, observing rainfall patterns, the slow rise and fall of the water, and sensing the reliability of these places. Life here unfolds gradually, shaped by repetition, observation, and care. Human activity begins to follow the land's natural cues, settling along trails that guide movement without force. In these subtle interactions, a larger pattern emerges, the interplay of water, earth, and human presence, slowly revealing the essential, patient logic of a landscape shaping and sustaining its inhabitants. The soil, dark and pliant after seasonal floods, beckons hands skilled in planting. You watch as early farmers carefully select seeds, pressing them into earth that remembers past cycles of growth. Water is drawn from natural pools, sometimes flowing gently in newly dug channels, guiding sustenance to sprouting shoots. These simple acts, repeated quietly, begin to shape both the land and the people, teaching a subtle lesson. Certain places reward attention, patience, and care, and in return, they provide life more abundantly than elsewhere. Although no fences have been erected and no authority commands the area, human presence begins to create familiarity. Groups return to the same locations repeatedly, leaving footprints that overlap and intertwine with those of others. The earth itself becomes a canvas for memory, each step a gentle impression that marks the land without force. You sense that, through this repetition, patterns form slowly, A place once anonymous now carries the whispers of past activity and a promise of return. Trade and exchange, quiet and informal, begin to establish themselves. People leave simple gifts of food, tools, or decorative items for neighbors encountered along the familiar paths. Stories are told of past seasons, unusual weather, or remarkable wildlife sightings. These exchanges create a soft network of understanding, linking separate groups with shared knowledge, while still allowing freedom to move elsewhere. It is an order born not of law, but of habit and mutual recognition. Gentle and almost invisible in its authority, strategic importance becomes apparent in subtle ways. Locations near the river offer easy access to water, fertile soil, and transportation routes, making them quietly coveted. Even without a formal claim, you can feel why people might prefer to linger here, why some groups may return before others, or why repeated visits gradually transform a once neutral patch into a place of significance. The land whispers its own story, teaching those who listen that not all soil is equal, and that some corners of the world are naturally more sustaining. You notice a quiet rhythm emerging, where human activity and the cycles of nature intertwine. Animals graze where paths cross, crops are harvested and replanted, and seasonal floods nourish the soil in predictable patterns. Each return, each careful placement of seeds or shelter reinforces the sense of connection. Over time, the land ceases to feel like an open expanse and begins to acquire meaning, a subtle awareness among humans that some places are not merely occupied, but cherished and revisited with intention. Memory begins to settle into the land. Repeated footprints, simple markers of stone or wood, and temporary shelters that last longer than a single day, all leave impressions. You can sense the quiet formation of local knowledge. Which areas provide the best water, where shade is abundant? Which fields yield the richest harvest? These practical insights shape how people move, where they return, and how they interact with one another, cultivating a gentle but persistent sense of belonging and familiarity without any formal boundaries. Even though no explicit ownership exists, subtle hierarchies and patterns emerge. Groups that arrive first may set small precedents for placement of shelters, division of water, or access to fertile patches. Later arrivals notice these precedents, respecting them out of practicality rather than law. A rhythm develops. Those who come early establish comfort and routine. Those who arrive later adapt, and the land itself becomes a teacher of patience and careful observation, guiding behavior without coercion. By the end of the day, the river continues its steady flow. Indifferent to human activity, yet it carries the marks of repeated presence. Paths have formed, subtle patterns of movement are recognized, and the land holds memory even as new stories begin to unfold. You realize that even in this quiet stage, a profound change is underway. Humans are beginning to see land not as a temporary backdrop, but as a space with value, rhythm, and significance, a canvas for their lives, actions, and gentle claims that have yet to be spoken aloud. The land endures in patient silence, its contours and textures unchanged by passing seasons, while human eyes and hands slowly awaken to its latent potential. Stepping back, you observe the way sunlight drapes across hills and valleys, illuminating patches that seem to hold promise. Subtle patterns emerge in soil, water, and vegetation, revealing places capable of sustaining life. In watching carefully, you sense the land not merely as terrain, but as a quiet partner in the unfolding of human experience. As the sun dips lower toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains, a soft shift settles in perception. The once entirely open and free world now carries whispers of promise and responsibility. Certain spaces, previously unnoticed, acquire a quiet preciousness, calling for care and attention. In this gentle awareness, the first stirrings of land, mattering take root, shaping memory, guiding settlement, and sowing the patient beginnings of a future where human presence and the earth intertwine thoughtfully. You notice that the small huts, once clearly temporary, now carry a subtle sense of permanence. Their walls, constructed simply from reeds, branches, or mud, suggest intention rather than haste. Smoke rises lazily from small fires, curling into the sky in delicate spirals. It seems as if the land itself recognizes this choice, acknowledging the presence of people who have begun to anchor themselves patiently, leaving the first quiet marks of enduring habitation. Early signs of permanence emerge in small, almost unnoticed details. Footprints linger longer in the soft soil. Worn paths trace repeated journeys, and tools are carefully placed rather than abandoned. Each small gesture demonstrates thoughtfulness and intent, signaling a return. To a casual observer, these acts may appear ordinary, but they indicate a deeper rhythm of life. Slowly, the land seems to respond, embracing the beginnings of human settlement with gentle acceptance. Later arrivals approach cautiously, observing the early dwellers without disruption. There is no confrontation, no assertion of dominance. Instead, a subtle understanding develops. The first settlers have established presence through their steady routines. Interaction is muted exchanged glances, small nods, and occasional gestures. Suffice. Water sources are sometimes shared, sometimes respected as private. In this quiet balance, the land mediates human relationships, guiding cooperation and respect without formal rules or overt negotiation. Paths that were once transient begin to take on permanence. Repeated footsteps carve faint trails in soil, marking routes that become familiar and reliable. Travelers return to the same spots over days and weeks, creating a pattern that echoes across the landscape. Familiarity grows naturally from repetition, and the once blank plains gain memory. These emerging trails signify more than movement. They reflect the subtle human impulse to settle, recognize, and navigate space thoughtfully. Even the land itself subtly transforms in response to human activity. Trampled grasses yield to small clearings, fertile plots are tended with care, and temporary shelters evolve into structures that endure sun and rain. Small marker stones at boundaries, sticks arranged for fires, communicate intentions without words. These signals reinforce, precedent, and subtly guide newcomers. Slowly, the landscape becomes a living map of human presence, quiet yet meaningful, illustrating how life can begin to root and shape the earth simultaneously. People begin to see the land with new awareness. Those who linger longer associate particular areas with safety, productivity, and comfort. The land transforms from a simple backdrop into something familiar, intimate, and instructive. Children follow elders' footsteps, learning which plants are edible, where water gathers, and how the natural rhythms unfold. Knowledge accumulates naturally, passed through observation and repetition, as the land itself becomes a quiet teacher, shaping behavior, habits, and understanding. Life develops a gentle rhythm, predictable yet soft. Daily routines emerge, tending small plots, gathering water, maintaining fires, and preparing simple meals. The land responds in kind, offering sustenance steadily and reliably. Familiarity grows, and impermanence diminishes. Even minor signs of continued presence, a worn path, a fire pit, a carefully stacked bundle of reeds carry meaning, establishing a subtle co-creation between humans and earth where each influences and supports the other. From these early interactions, a nascent sense of territory begins to take form. Repeated use, subtle precedence, and careful observation define areas that are regularly inhabited, even without formal declaration. The land holds memory, storing traces in soil, vegetation, and water. It is not rigid ownership, but a soft, enduring presence. Later arrivals learn where to move freely, where to respect prior use, and where cooperation is needed to maintain balance. Seasonal groups gradually recognize these precedents. No written law dictates behavior, yet intuitive. Order emerges. Who arrived first, which areas are regularly used, and where resources are managed. By observing and repeating these patterns, newcomers learn the rhythm of coexistence. Over time, a silent structure develops, guiding behavior, instilling respect for earlier dwellers, and showing that permanence grows through attention, habit, and patient observation rather than confrontation. The land itself gains significance over time. Sunlight warms familiar paths, shadows stretch across cleared areas, and subtle signs of repeated presence are everywhere. Smoke from fires, footprints, and tended plots indicate human engagement. These acts are quiet, almost invisible to outsiders. Yet they mark transformation. Life is no longer merely passing through. It intertwines with the land, co-creating patterns both deliberate and naturally emergent, forming the earliest foundations of belonging and coexistence. The small huts become more than simple shelters. They are markers of human intent. There, construction, careful placement, and maintenance signal permanence and purpose. Smoke rising from fires communicates presence, while organized tools, food, and bedding demonstrate foresight. Even without words, humans and land exchange lessons about care and attention. Each repeated action strengthens bonds between people and earth, forming a foundation for culture, knowledge, and the beginnings of community. Children observe and learn from these patterns, absorbing knowledge naturally through repetition. Paths traced by elders guide them to safe routes, water sources, and edible plants. Daily routines tending small plots, gathering resources, maintaining fires instill. Rhythm and discipline. Knowledge passes silently through presence and attention rather than formal teaching. The land itself becomes a teacher, offering lessons in observation, patience, and balance, showing how human activity can harmonize with an environment that responds to care. Early alliances take shape quietly through shared labor and mutual respect. Groups negotiate access to resources without force, balancing solitude and cooperation. Some areas are avoided for privacy, while fertile plots and water sources are shared. These subtle interactions form a social fabric without laws or walls. Over time, repeated observation, gentle cooperation, and consistent presence establish trust, soft boundaries, and a predictable rhythm, fostering a community that emerges naturally from human behavior and the land itself. Repeated use gradually transforms both people and land. Trampled grasses give way to small clearings, and shelters grow stronger and more durable. Minor markers, stones, sticks, or arrangements communicate information to newcomers. Familiarity grows alongside repeated presence, reinforcing patterns of movement and settlement. These small cumulative changes influence human behavior and shape the environment, showing how attentive observation and adaptation allow to intertwine slowly and meaningfully with the rhythms and patterns of the land. As seasons pass, human life becomes more organized yet remains responsive. Daily routines arise naturally, supported by the land, which provides sustenance reliably without rigid rules. Paths, fire pits, and carefully tended areas carry significance, marking repeated presence. Over time, humans and land co-create enduring patterns, teaching lessons in subtle precedence, cooperation, and respect. By sunset, the landscape shows transformation. Life is anchored, memory and habit take root, and a foundation for belonging, stewardship, and quiet order emerges. You notice a day that seems ordinary at first, yet carries subtle significance. A group lingers longer than usual, arranging stones, sticks, and earth with careful attention. Their actions are deliberate, not rushed. The land receives their presence, quietly, without protest. Other groups approach cautiously, observing the activity from a distance. Through instinct and observation, they sense that these spaces are now claimed, not through force, but through consistent, patient presence. No harsh confrontations occur. Instead, a measured acknowledgement arises. Presence can speak louder than words. The act of building, though gentle, carries meaning. Simple shelters take shape, sturdy against wind and rain. Small markers, lines of stones, cleared patches of earth signal intent without aggression. Children watch silently, noting which areas adults occupy most frequently. Even the soil and vegetation adjust subtly, shaped by repeated use, reinforcing the quiet claim of those who stay. Older members of the group move with calm authority, guiding others to their tasks. Their gestures are soft, deliberate, and precise, communicating priority and mutual respect. The previous rhythm of life in the area shifts slowly, bending to the new reality. No shouting occurs, no anger erupts. Even the animals, attuned to human movement, adjust their routines slightly, sensing the quiet permanence of these newcomers and the emerging stability of the land under human presence. The concept of ownership begins almost imperceptibly. Among the people arises a simple thought: this area is ours. It is not forced or declared loudly. Instead, it is understood collectively. The land allows this transition through patient observation. Paths once neutral now carry implicit meaning. Areas ideal for water, shelter, or foraging are recognized and respected. Even the wind seems to participate, brushing grass in gentle insistence, echoing the unspoken continuity of human presence. Those who previously moved freely adjust. Some relocate to nearby stretches of river or forest, finding comfort in distance and new resources. Others integrate cautiously, negotiating subtly for access to shared resources without challenging the nascent claim. Social habits begin to shift naturally. Shared knowledge of water, agreed upon resting spots, and the gentle avoidance of newly occupied shelters form patterns. The land mediates these interactions, and humans adapt without conflict. The previous order dissolves softly, imperceptibly. No one announces defeat, and no angry retreat occurs. Instead, a quiet withdrawal emerges, a graceful adjustment to inevitable change. Life continues, but with new rhythms. Longer occupation, repeated use of specific plots, and subtle negotiation for resources are observed. These seemingly small actions ripple outward, establishing precedents that will guide others in the future and create the earliest form of human-regulated space. As evening approaches, smoke curls rhythmically from small fires, signaling routine. Children mimic adult behaviors, gathering small branches, observing shelter layouts, noting areas regularly used. This unspoken education solidifies the group's presence. Over time, the land stores memory of these acts. Soil, tracks, and even compressed grass retain evidence of repeated activity. Ownership, though quiet and subtle, is inscribed into the landscape with enduring impact. The land becomes a teacher, revealing lessons in permanence without conflict. Those who remain longer begin to understand the rhythm of tending space and marking presence. Repetition and familiarity build a sense of security, forming a soft infrastructure of human occupation. Others learn from observation, adjusting behavior accordingly. The power of consistent presence emerges as a stronger claim than any shout or fight could achieve, quietly shaping social interaction and patterns of land use. Every action, from placing a stone to clearing a patch, reinforces the emerging claim. Familiarity grows naturally, guiding movement and activity across the area. The land itself participates, shaping vegetation, compacting soil along frequent paths, and reflecting repeated human use. Over time, subtle adjustments by the land and humans co-create a rhythm of coexistence, a tacit agreement that some spaces belong more firmly to those who care for them consistently. Early social structures develop in this context. Groups begin coordinating access to water, fertile soil, and shaded areas without formal laws. Cooperation emerges naturally alongside subtle avoidance, balancing privacy and shared needs. Patterns of trust form through repeated interactions. These small, consistent behaviors establish a social fabric grounded in observation, patience, and respect. Human presence becomes organized, predictable, and respected, yet remains flexible enough to respond to natural rhythms and environmental changes. The environment transforms gradually, reflecting human occupation. Trampled grasses give way to small clearings. Shelters become sturdier and more durable. Marker sticks, stones, cleared patches communicate information to those observing from afar. These small signs guide newcomers and reinforce existing patterns. Over time, humans and land influence one another continuously, shaping both behavior and the environment. Repetition and care create permanence that grows quietly, unassumingly, yet undeniably. Daily life settles into gentle patterns. Tasks tending plots, maintaining fires, gathering resources repeat predictably, offering stability. The land responds, providing sustenance steadily. Even small markers carry significance, establishing order without force. Over repeated cycles, humans and land co-create deliberate patterns. Knowledge passes through observation, soil retains memory, and community begins to emerge organically. Through repetition, observation, and patience, precedence becomes recognized. Later arrivals instinctively respect earlier use. The land records memory, holding traces of human activity. Conflict is unnecessary. Soft order emerges as humans follow existing rhythms, adapting to spatial and social patterns already present. The land teaches respect, coexistence, and sustainable practice. Permanence develops through habit, attention, and quiet cooperation. By sunset, the transformation is tangible yet subtle. Footsteps, shelters, cleared patches, and tending of plots mark intention and permanence. Soft alliances and gentle precedents intertwine, creating a landscape imbued with memory and meaning. Life is no longer fleeting. Presence, observation, and repeated care establish enduring claims. The land now holds a story of human occupation, a rhythm of coexistence, and the first seeds of stewardship, belonging, and socially mediated order. The first declaration of quiet ownership is complete. It is subtle, deliberate, and enduring, needing neither ceremony nor conquest. The land, now shaped by human patterns, holds memory and precedence. Change has occurred gently yet irrevocably. Foundations of human-land interaction are established, showing that permanence, respect, and community emerge through observation, care, and repetition rather than force. A new order exists, patient and lasting. Twilight deepens, casting long shadows across the plains. The day ends without fanfare, yet a milestone has been reached. Human presence is anchored. Memory, habit, and repeated attention have inscribed. Subtle ownership. Children, adults, and the environment engage in a quiet, ongoing dialogue. This gentle, deliberate emergence of permanence will guide interactions for generations, creating life shaped by patience, care, and respect. The following days unfold with soft transitions. Some families, sensing the new claim, move slightly farther downstream, discovering fertile areas previously unoccupied. Others remain, observing carefully, learning to coexist without confrontation. A subtle negotiation emerges. Who uses which path, who tends which patch of earth, and who draws water from specific bends in the river. The land supports these adjustments, providing familiar resources and teaching patience through repetition. You notice that the once open expanse begins to feel different. No longer a mere place to pass through, it has become a space with expectations. Certain areas are habitually tended, and repeated patterns of movement form invisible lines of demarcation. Children follow older footsteps, learning where they may move freely and where caution is needed. Adults adjust routines subtly, respecting these soft boundaries while maintaining survival and comfort. Life settles into quiet patterns. Daily activities: collecting water, tending small plots, preparing meals follow rhythms influenced by neighbors and recognized claims. There is no fear, only gentle awareness that the landscape carries memory and precedence. Individuals move carefully, harmonizing with established use. The land itself has become an instructor, teaching balance and observation, encouraging humans to act thoughtfully and consistently within the emerging order of shared space. Emotion settles over the people like a soft blanket. Marked spaces do not provoke anxiety, but inspire curiosity. Watching others work, interact, and navigate partially claimed land fosters understanding. Moments of light-hearted amusement appear as neighbors invent small games to share paths or negotiate access. Through these routines, the land teaches patience, repetition, and careful observation, guiding behavior subtly yet continuously. Embedding lessons in everyday life, the land itself participates in this adjustment. Paths harden under repeated footsteps. Vegetation shifts subtly where foraging occurs, and the water's edge reflects traces of human presence. Each change is gentle, allowing adaptation while signaling continuity. These soft imprints of life create familiarity, guiding interactions, reinforcing respect, and nurturing an unspoken sense of belonging among all who dwell within this gradually organized landscape. Patterns of coexistence emerge naturally. Groups that previously moved seasonally begin anticipating each other's presence. Waterholes, clearings, and fertile plots are shared with mutual understanding, while less used areas remain flexible for newcomers. The landscape, once neutral, now holds subtle rules. Repeated presence implies precedence. Familiarity guides movement, and the land itself maintains a quiet order without enforcement, shaping behavior gently through its memory. Over time, daily, life gains quiet stability. Crops begin to flourish. Fires are maintained with care, and communal understanding deepens. Humans move deliberately, following rhythms of familiarity, observing respected spaces, and adjusting accordingly. Even animals respond instinctively, reinforcing the perception of permanence. Daily routines blend seamlessly with the land, forming a soft structure of shared expectation and emergent social patterns that grow naturally from repeated, gentle human activity. By observing these changes, you realize the land has acquired new meaning for its inhabitants. It is no longer simply space. It carries structure, precedence, and implicit rules. The concept of shared yet bounded areas develops organically. Minimal conflict arises because the land itself enforces order. Subtly, the transformation is almost invisible, yet deeply effective, reshaping daily life through habit, observation, and adaptation rather than through force or explicit decree. Evenings bring quiet reflection. Individuals notice small alterations. Worn paths, clustered stones, and slight clearings marking repeated activity. These signs reinforce understanding of territory, softening the transition from open land to subtly claimed space. People adapt gradually, guided by observation, habit, and subtle cues left by others. The landscape becomes a silent teacher, showing how cooperation, attention, and repeated presence maintain balance. Children learn through participation, following elders along worn paths, observing patterns of work, and recognizing which areas are most frequently used. Knowledge accumulates organically, passed by presence rather than instruction. The land itself becomes an educator, teaching patience, careful observation, and the rhythms of repeated use. Through these lessons, humans absorb the earliest forms of social norms, learning how coexistence, respect, and shared stewardship emerge naturally. Neighbors develop quiet habits of cooperation. Shared water sources, fertile plots, and shaded areas are managed through observation rather than explicit rules. Groups learn which areas to avoid and which can be approached safely. Over time, repeated behavior reinforces soft agreements. The land records these patterns, holding memory that guides future actions. Human interaction begins to align with environmental cues, creating an emergent social order without formal governance or conflict. Repeated use gradually shapes both humans and the environment. Vegetation responds to foot traffic, small clearings emerge, and shelters evolve with durability. Stones or stick arrangements communicate unspoken signals. Familiarity grows, reinforcing movement patterns, tending areas, and cooperative behaviors. These cumulative adjustments demonstrate how careful, repeated attention allows humans and land to co-create stable systems of use, embedding social and environmental memory in tangible ways. Daily routines anchor human life further. Tasks such as tending plots, gathering water, and maintaining fires repeat predictably, establishing a rhythm. These cycles stabilize presence and allow individuals to coordinate actions with neighbors. Soft boundaries form naturally through repeated occupation and observation. Over time, this creates a structure of coexistence that balances resource use, safety, and space, while maintaining flexibility and responsiveness to environmental changes and the needs of different groups. Gradually, a quiet understanding of precedence emerges. Later arrivals recognize the rhythm established by those who came first, adapting to existing patterns. The land itself enforces soft order, with subtle cues signaling which spaces are already tended or favored. Humans internalize these lessons, learning to settle without conflict. Over repeated cycles, respect, cooperation, and habit form the earliest structures of social norms and community interaction. As the days and seasons unfold, the people have adapted to both land and one another. Some families relocated to newly discovered fertile areas, while others remained in their familiar spots, each adjusting to the emerging rhythms. The landscape now carries memory of repeated presence, and daily life intertwines with subtle awareness of soft boundaries, creating a gentle, continuous evolution of human patterns and environmental interaction. Over time, these adjustments solidify into a quiet, patient order. Movement, labor, and routines harmonize with existing traces, reinforcing respect and understanding among all groups. The land itself records these interactions, embedding memory into soil, paths, and vegetation. Life has become delicately entwined with the environment, establishing the earliest foundations of coexistence. Humans and land now shape one another through repeated mindful presence, subtly guiding future generations. As permanence becomes accepted, you observe the emergence of soft governance. Certain individuals naturally take responsibility for decisions, who tend specific plots, who organizes collective tasks, and who communicates about resource use. Authority is subtle, conveyed through gestures, consistency, and experience rather than commands. Others follow easily, trusting observation over decrees. The land reinforces this order, rewarding care, routine, and mindful stewardship through its response to repeated human activity. Early rules appear quietly. Certain clearings are habitually used by specific groups, while paths to waterholes take on predictable patterns. Shelters are placed with awareness of neighbors' spaces. These rules are informal yet widely recognized, guiding behavior without overt instruction. Mutual respect ensures minimal conflict. The environment itself participates, subtly signaling when behaviors support harmony or when actions risk disrupting the balance. Maintained through gentle adaptation. The sharing of resources develops naturally. Some crops are left intentionally for neighbors, and small contributions are exchanged without expectation. Fires are maintained cooperatively in communal areas, while tools, baskets, or other implements are lent as needed. This system mirrors the emerging authority structure, predictable, reliable, and grounded in trust. Consistency becomes more important than formal rules, and reciprocity encourages adherence while maintaining harmony across all groups. Control is present but gentle, rooted in experience and observation rather than coercion. Humans and land adapt to each other, learning which areas require care, which behaviors preserve stability, and which tasks demand repetition. Authority is respected because it aligns with observable outcomes. Compliance arises from convenience and recognition, not fear. Disruption produces subtle inconvenience rather than punishment, teaching lessons without confrontation. Patterns of activity reinforce the new order. Daily routines, paths, and management of resources all conform to soft structures. Individuals internalize expectations, acting predictably to sustain balance. Repetition strengthens authority and builds trust. Stability becomes a quiet, consistent force, allowing communities to plan, maintain productive plots, and navigate shared spaces with ease. Even the land participates, rewarding careful use with fertile soil, reliable water, and accessible resources. As seasons pass, soft governance solidifies. Water flows, soil recovers, and vegetation adapts to patterns of use. Communities grow predictable yet resilient, able to accommodate newcomers while maintaining boundaries. Subtle methods of negotiation handle minor conflicts, while shared understanding of space and resources reduces tension. Social interactions reflect this order. Greetings, shared labor, and avoidance help enforce soft norms, ensuring coexistence without formal rules or overt enforcement. Daily life becomes increasingly structured. Individuals follow habitual paths, tending plots and drawing water with awareness of neighbors. Activities develop rhythm and predictability, reflecting soft authority. Children learn by observation, internalizing behavioral expectations. Tasks are coordinated without direct instruction. The landscape responds, stabilizing under repeated use. Patterns of human behavior and environmental care intertwine, creating a subtle but durable framework for sustainable living. Authority is subtle, recognized through experience and consistency rather than proclamation. Certain elders or experienced individuals take on responsibility naturally. They guide tasks, allocate resources informally, and coordinate communal activities. Others follow willingly, trusting that guidance aligns with established routines. Respect for authority is reinforced through observation, repetition, and mutual recognition. Over time, soft governance becomes an intrinsic part of daily life, embedded in the interactions between people and land. Rules governing space and resources are habitual. Waterholes, clearings, and fertile patches acquire predictable usage patterns. Shelters, paths, and work areas are positioned thoughtfully, minimizing overlap and tension. These conventions are informal, but understood and respected by all. Mutual acknowledgement ensures minimal conflict. The land itself reinforces order, subtly rewarding behaviors that maintain harmony and discouraging actions that disrupt the equilibrium of daily life and resource sharing. Resource sharing develops into patterned practice. Food, water, and tools are exchanged based on need, observation, and fairness. Cooperation is embedded into everyday routines, not enforced. Communal tasks, fire tending, irrigation, or clearing, are coordinated intuitively. This network of trust and predictability forms the backbone of soft governance. Individuals act with awareness of collective needs, balancing personal interest with communal benefit, ensuring the continuity of life and reinforcing respect for established norms. Daily routines reinforce authority and stability. Repetition of work, movement, and interaction strengthens understanding of roles and responsibilities. Individuals become attuned to expectations without instruction. The land rewards care and routine. Soil fertility, water availability, and plant growth respond to consistent human management. Observing and adapting to environmental feedback reinforces patterns of cooperation and respect, teaching lessons about balance, patience, and long-term stewardship. Over time, coexistence becomes seamless. Groups anticipate each other's presence, avoiding conflict naturally. Shared spaces are used with understanding. Less frequented areas remain flexible for newcomers. Familiarity with neighbors' habits fosters subtle negotiation and trust. Authority remains quiet yet effective, grounded in practical knowledge rather than enforcement. The land serves as both teacher and recorder, embedding memory of human activity that shapes ongoing behavior and community structure. The rhythm of life stabilizes further. Crops flourish, paths harden under repeated footsteps, and shelters endure. Through seasons, individuals perform tasks with awareness of neighbors and land, internalizing soft rules. Authority is self-reinforcing. Those who guide do so through example and consistency. Trust spreads organically, reinforcing cooperation. Environmental feedback sustains predictability, and daily life becomes a carefully balanced interaction between humans and their surroundings. Social interactions reflect soft governance. Greetings, cooperation, and avoidance of conflict reinforce boundaries and patterns. Communities operate intuitively, recognizing precedents and shared responsibilities. Subtle negotiation of space and resources maintains harmony, while repeated observation ensures newcomers learn the emerging norms. The landscape itself communicates memory and expectation, signaling where activity is welcome and where restraint is appropriate, guiding human behavior without formal imposition. Eventually, the landscape bears the imprint of these practices. Paths, tended plots, and communal areas record repeated human activity. Authority, respect, and resource sharing are embedded in daily routines, creating predictability. The land itself becomes a partner in governance, guiding behavior through feedback and memory. This subtle system of order is quiet, enduring, and self-sustaining, ensuring human presence and community can thrive without conflict or coercion. At the close of this period, the land has transformed subtly yet significantly. Movement, labor, and routines now follow predictable patterns. Humans navigate with awareness of each other, responding to soft boundaries and authority recognized through experience. The environment holds memory of repeated presence, supporting stability. The new order is patient, deliberate, and enduring, providing a foundation for continued settlement, cooperative living, and the ongoing evolution of soft governance in harmony with the land. The land now bears quiet traces of human life. Worn paths mark repeated journeys, clearings show consistent use, and carefully tended plots signal long-term care. These subtle marks form informal boundaries, easily understood by those who live there. Even newcomers intuitively sense which areas are occupied and which remain open. The land quietly records human activity, preserving memory and laying the groundwork for early notions of ownership. Early routines begin to shape human interaction with the land. Paths worn by repeated footsteps guide travelers and small clearings. Near waterholes are habitually used for work or rest. These informal patterns structure daily activity and influence social behavior. Observation teaches newcomers to move respectfully. The land responds to repeated use, compacting soil, altering vegetation, and offering subtle cues that guide and reinforce human behavior over time. Economic patterns emerge gradually. Fertile plots produce more consistent harvests, and small accumulations of resources become noticeable. Baskets of grain are stored or shared, signaling cooperation, foresight, and mutual trust. Modest surpluses allow for subtle differentiation and careful planning. Observation of these resources informs daily decisions. Sharing, coordination, and attention to growth cycles establish the earliest framework of a sustainable, human-managed settlement economy. Cultural identity begins to anchor itself within the landscape. Around fires, stories are told about our land and the paths traversed by earlier generations. Children learn through observation, understanding the meaning of stones, markers, and water sources. Repetition and attentive practice embed knowledge into daily life. The land becomes a living repository for tradition, with subtle rituals of care and observation reinforcing communal bonds across time. Even as human culture grows, the land remains patient. Streams continue flowing, grasses sway, and wildlife adapts to human presence without conflict. The environment teaches lessons of continuity and balance. Humans internalize these lessons gradually, learning how to integrate sustainable practices into daily life. Careful tending of plots, selective use of resources, and respect for movement patterns emerge naturally, reinforcing coexistence while allowing both human and environmental rhythms to develop harmoniously. Over repeated seasons, soft social structures solidify. Paths, clearings, and dwellings acquire habitual use. Cooperative practices become predictable. Minor disputes resolve through observation and mutual adjustment. The land retains memory, reinforcing behaviors without enforcement. Shared use of water, fertile soil, and communal areas develops trust. These patterns support collaboration, teaching newcomers to adapt and participate in the emerging social and ecological order, creating a sense of calm, durable community. Routines and labor deepen connection with place. Daily cycles, planting, harvesting, fetching water, maintaining shelters, are repeated consistently. Children follow elders, absorbing patterns and knowledge without formal instruction. Resource allocation, movement through shared spaces, and cooperative maintenance of infrastructure all become intuitive. Humans adjust behavior according to both environmental feedback and social precedent. These repeated interactions reinforce stability, embedding memory into land and community alike. The land itself shapes perception and practice. Soil responds to repeated cultivation, clearings stabilize, and paths grow distinct from habitual use. Vegetation shifts subtly, reflecting human activity and signaling suitable areas for settlement. Streams, meadows, and waterholes adjust to human traffic patterns, while wildlife alters its behavior around established dwellings. Observation of these responses informs future behavior, teaching residents to balance exploitation with care and fostering a sustainable rhythm that is quietly self-reinforcing. Community understanding strengthens. Individuals recognize habitual use and respect others' patterns of movement. Water sources, fertile plots, and preferred shelters are shared intuitively. Boundaries exist without formal declaration, maintained through observation and repetition. Social norms evolve organically. Cooperation is rewarded, encroachment avoided. Humans learn subtle negotiation skills, creating a stable network of interaction. Authority arises through example and experience, supporting harmony while remaining soft, flexible, and contextually responsive. Patterns of exchange and care form an emergent economy. shared labor, food distribution, and cooperative maintenance. Establish trust networks. Surplus is modestly distributed or stored, enabling limited planning and provision for lean periods. These systems rely on observation, repetition, and memory rather than enforcement. Behavioral norms become internalized. Individuals learn to anticipate neighbors' needs, coordinate resource use, and maintain communal spaces, producing both practical stability and subtle social cohesion. Over years, the landscape is transformed. Frequent paths, cleared plots, and enduring shelters reflect repeated human action. Resource management is structured but flexible, guided by habit and observation. Children inherit these practices naturally, reinforcing continuity. Social and environmental memory grows, embedding cultural, economic, and ecological patterns into the land. The interplay of human activity and environmental response establishes a slow, steady rhythm, creating enduring, subtle order that is resilient yet adaptive. Identity and tradition intertwine with the land. Storytelling, observation, and participation embed knowledge and social practice in daily life. Shared memory is carried across seasons, teaching resource management, respect, and cooperation. Markers, habitual paths, and cultivated plots carry meaning beyond practical function, encoding lessons for future generations. Children learn to navigate these spaces intuitively, absorbing lessons of responsibility, observation, and the ethical use of shared resources through experience and gentle instruction. Even as culture and economy develop, the land maintains agency. Streams flow, winds shift, and vegetation responds, offering feedback to human actions. Environmental cues guide settlement choices, planting, and movement. Humans adjust accordingly, internalizing lessons on balance, patience, and sustainability. This continuous dialogue allows coexistence to thrive without conflict, creating a nuanced, durable relationship between people and their surroundings that is reinforced through experience and observation rather than decree. Soft governance and customary rules emerge naturally. Daily routines, shared responsibilities, and repeated patterns create predictable behavior. Authority is recognized without coercion. Elders or experienced individuals coordinate tasks intuitively with compliance, arising from trust and habit. Mutual respect guides shared spaces. Disputes are minimal, resolved through observation and gentle adjustment. Over time, these conventions produce stability, reinforcing social cohesion while remaining flexible enough to accommodate newcomers. And environmental changes dot by this period's end. Humans and land are deeply intertwined. Once open, neutral spaces now carry memory, identity, and unspoken rules. Paths, tended plots, and shared stories connect generations. Daily economic and social practices reinforce continuity. Through observation, participation, and adaptation, humans and environment co-create a resilient, enduring landscape, establishing the foundations of settlement, culture, and long-term stewardship across seasons and generations. Life continues, marked by quiet stability. Children learn through observation. Plots are tended with care, and community practices persist. The land bears memory of repeated actions, guiding behavior and reinforcing soft social norms. Economic patterns, cultural knowledge, and social expectations are internalized naturally. Humans interact harmoniously with their surroundings, creating a subtle yet lasting system where presence, care, and observation define both belonging and stewardship over time. The flow of life shifts subtly as populations increase. More people arrive, drawn by fertile soil and reliable water access. The gentle balance of earlier patterns is tested, though quietly. Groups adjust their routes, negotiate access to cultivated plots, and observe each other with care. The land, patient and unchanging, absorbs these small shifts, recording memory of past occupancy, while subtly guiding new behaviors and relationships among both humans and environment. New arrivals amplify the subtle pressures on shared spaces. Paths once lightly traveled become more frequented. Clearings see increased activity, and familiar water sources are visited more often. The presence of multiple groups challenges the rhythms of previous routines, yet interactions remain understated. Observation, anticipation, and careful adjustment prevail. The land mediates these changes naturally, offering stability, cues, and continuity that encourage coexistence without conflict. Boundaries, though informal, are tested. Groups negotiate subtly where to settle, which plots to cultivate, and how to share resources. Avoidance and cooperation dominate behavior, preventing overt disputes. Small gestures, a nod, a pause, a deferred group maintain peace. Even slight tension is tempered by repetition and habit. The land itself reinforces these patterns, marking worn paths, compacted soil, and favored areas, subtly guiding humans toward equilibrium. The emergent authority experiences minor strain under these pressures. Leaders or experienced individuals adjust responsibilities to maintain balance. Resource allocation is monitored, pathways managed, and communal duties coordinated with care. Conflicts arise occasionally, but they are resolved quietly and efficiently, rarely disrupting daily life. Individuals learn to read patterns, anticipate needs, and align actions with both social expectations and the land's cues. Occupation patterns evolve under increasing density. Paths shift slightly to accommodate multiple users. Water collection, hunting, and foraging routines are adapted to prevent overlap and tension. Trade or small exchanges begin to emerge, responding to need and opportunity. Authority flexes, enforcing or relaxing norms subtly to maintain stability. The land's topography and repeated use provide cues that guide these adaptations, ensuring continued harmony despite growing population. Daily routines reflect this evolving social structure. Activities caring for plots, collecting water, tending fires are coordinated with awareness of neighbors' actions. People observe and adapt their behavior to avoid interference. Even children learn these rhythms, understanding where they can move freely and where caution is required. The land silently enforces continuity, teaching respect for repeated presence while accommodating gradual expansion. Seasonal cycles intensify these pressures. Dry and wet periods alter the availability of water and fertile soil, requiring adjustments in movement and cultivation. Groups respond by spreading activity across the landscape, timing tasks according to natural rhythms. Coordination becomes necessary to prevent depletion and conflict. Despite these challenges, the land continues to provide stability, mediating human activity with patience and gentle guidance, embedding memory of each adaptation. Interaction between groups deepens subtly. Observation and imitation guide behavior more than instruction. Resources are shared sparingly but predictably. Avoidance occurs where necessary, yet cooperative efforts emerge naturally, strengthening soft social bonds. The land, familiar to all, reinforces this emerging system through repeated use. Patterns of settlement, cultivation, and movement adjust in concert, creating a resilient network of behaviors that balances population growth and environmental sustainability. Authority remains informal but functional. Decisions are guided by observation, experience, and subtle precedents. Tasks are allocated efficiently without formal enforcement. The land itself plays a role in reinforcing respect for authority, as repeated use of specific areas and shared memory of prior actions signal who has priority. Compliance is habitual rather than forced, and deviation is rare because the benefits of harmony outweigh the risks of disruption. Even minor conflicts are absorbed without disruption. Disagreements over pathways, plots, or access to water are negotiated quietly. Observation and subtle social cues prevent escalation. The land's inherent consistency offers predictability, reinforcing expectations. Individuals adjust their movement, timing, and activities according to both the terrain and neighbors' presence. Over time, these small adjustments become embedded in the social fabric, ensuring continuity without formal rules. The land itself adapts alongside humans. Repeated foot traffic compacts soil. Vegetation shifts in response to gathering, and cleared areas reflect cumulative use. These subtle changes communicate information to newcomers about established routes and preferred spaces. Wildlife adjusts as well, navigating around human activity. The environment and inhabitants co-evolve, creating a system where presence, habit, and memory sustain a quiet equilibrium and guide adaptation naturally. Patterns of resource use become structured. Some fertile areas are left fallow or shared among multiple families. Waterholes, hunting grounds, and grazing areas acquire habitual schedules. The repetition of these routines reinforces stability. Even minor ritual, such as stacking firewood or marking paths with stones, signal consideration for others. Authority observes and subtly reinforces these norms, creating continuity across generations. The land's memory complements these behaviors, embedding knowledge physically into the environment. Observation becomes central to survival and social cohesion. Individuals anticipate the needs of neighbors, predict movements, and adjust their own activity accordingly. Children are educated through example, learning routes, resource locations, and social etiquette. The land provides cues that are intuitive and reliable. Repetition strengthens understanding, fostering harmony. In this way, population growth and resource pressure are accommodated with minimal disruption, relying on attentive behavior rather than formal enforcement. Seasons continue to shape interactions. Rainfall, floods, or droughts alter resource availability, prompting subtle shifts in routines and locations. Groups adapt, balancing cultivation, water collection, and movement. Cooperation and avoidance remain key strategies. The land, consistent yet responsive, guides these adaptations. Through repeated experience, humans internalize rules of coexistence, understanding how to maintain continuity in both social and ecological systems, ensuring survival while respecting long-established patterns. Over time, the elegance of quiet tension becomes apparent. It allows for continuity without conflict, learning without instruction, and adaptation without stress. Human behavior, social relationships, and land use evolve together, mediated by the memory of repeated presence. The subtle patterns of movement, use, and precedence prepare both the environment and its inhabitants for future shifts, fostering resilience and a self-regulating system that adapts naturally over time. By this period's close, the landscape is subtly transformed. Paths, plots, and habitual clearings reflect memory and precedence. Social norms are reinforced through observation, repetition, and minor adjustments. The land carries a record of human activity, while humans adjust to both environment and neighbors. Continuity, adaptability, and quiet governance define life. Even with increasing numbers, the system remains balanced, flexible, and resilient, demonstrating how humans and land co-create a sustainable, enduring pattern of coexistence. From a land that once belonged to no one, a quiet transformation has taken root. Human presence has become entwined with the geography, forming subtle patterns of movement, memory, and habitual care. Paths appear where feet repeatedly tread, small clearings signal activity, and water sources acquire repeated visitation. Authority emerges gently, not through conquest, but through consistent occupancy and observation, teaching patience and adaptation over time. The land itself becomes a patient teacher. Streams flow steadily, grasses sway under wind, and fertile soil responds to repeated use. Those who remain longest guide behavior, their actions recorded subtly in tracks, worn soil, and gathered resources. Others observe and learn, internalizing rhythms of care and cooperation. Even newcomers instinctively recognize areas already shaped by presence. Memory is embedded in the land, whispering lessons to those willing to notice. Ownership begins softly, unspoken yet perceptible. Repetition of presence creates familiarity, and familiarity signals claim. Paths, clearings, and habitual actions define boundaries without force. Those who linger longest gain influence. Those who arrive later adapt to existing patterns. Cooperation, subtle negotiation, and respect arise naturally. Life unfolds layered with precedent, guiding behavior quietly. The land absorbs these gestures, reinforcing continuity across time and generations. Cycles of life repeat in soft, deliberate ways. Presence leads to care, care to adaptation, and adaptation to subtle assertion of precedence. What is acquired may eventually be abandoned or lost, only to be reclaimed later. These patterns coexist with the land's constancy. Streams, winds, and seasonal light provide stability. Human activity aligns with these rhythms, reinforcing lessons in patience, observation, and respect, embedding social and ecological memory into everyday experience. Human communities evolve gently alongside the land. Some move to new areas, others remain, while all adapt to changing patterns. Paths are negotiated, shared resources observed, and habitual routines emerge. Authority is acknowledged through consistency and respect rather than decree. Conflicts are minimal, as the environment and human observation guide behavior. Memory is cumulative. Each generation learns by seeing, doing, and respecting prior acts of presence and care. The land absorbs culture as it shapes behavior. Around fires, stories link memory to place, while children learn paths, water sources, and markers through observation. Repetition embeds knowledge, identity, and continuity. Even small acts stacking wood, tending plots, arranging stones hold meaning. Gradually, the land becomes a living repository of social and ecological memory, quietly teaching care, cooperation, and coexistence to those who dwell upon it. Subtle authority structures stabilize patterns. Those experienced in the land's rhythms naturally coordinate activity, distributing tasks, observing resource use, and guiding newcomers. Compliance arises from understanding, not fear. The land reinforces this hierarchy, showing who arrived first or who maintains critical spaces. Authority is gentle and earned through action, consistent attention, and repeated participation, ensuring harmony and guiding human behavior across a landscape that is both familiar and alive. Seasonal cycles deepen understanding. Rainfall, drought, and sun alter resource availability. Humans adapt by adjusting routines, cultivating plots differently, and timing water collection. Cooperation emerges naturally, balancing needs across multiple groups. Observation of previous use guides decision-making. Even animals adjust movement, responding to human presence. The land mediates change, embedding memory of repeated activity and fostering coexistence without formal governance or coercion. Economic patterns form gradually. Fertile plots yield modest surpluses, enabling shared storage or trade. Resources are allocated thoughtfully, reinforcing cooperation and trust. Repetition of these routines consolidates memory, teaching newcomers the rhythms of cultivation, gathering, and distribution. Even minor contributions, firewood, water, or small food caches, signal respect for communal norms. Through these patterns, humans learn sustainable resource management and the balance between individual need and group harmony. Social order stabilizes without formal rules. Daily routines tending plots, fetching water, maintaining shelters align with established rhythms of occupation. Humans observe one another, adapting behavior to avoid disruption. Children absorb these patterns intuitively. Small conflicts are resolved through observation, timing, and adjustment rather than argument. The land itself supports this order, embedding precedents in soil, tracks, and habitual use, reinforcing a quiet, enduring system of coexistence. Over years, cultural identity merges with the land. Repeated acts, walking paths, arranging stones, maintaining shelters, create shared memory. Stories, rituals, and routines are rooted in geography. Children internalize these lessons naturally. Even as generations pass, these soft structures persist, preserving continuity. The land silently witnesses history, teaching permanence, adaptation, and soft authority. Humans and environment co-evolve, forming traditions and culture that intertwine ecological memory with social memory. Presence shapes permanence. Those who remain longest gain influence, subtly guiding newcomers. Repetition and observation become forms of soft authority. The land records each action, embedding precedents physically. Cooperation and avoidance define interactions more than force. Human behavior becomes aligned with environmental cues. Memory accumulates in pathways, soil, and vegetation. This combination of habit, observation, and respect establishes long-term stability, both socially and ecologically, without formal laws or enforcement. Even as populations grow, the system adapts. Increased density challenges routines, yet subtle negotiation maintains balance. Shared spaces, paths, and water sources are used predictably. Conflicts are minor, resolved quietly. Authority adjusts gently. The land, consistent and patient, absorbs changes while providing cues to maintain equilibrium. Humans learn the value of patience, observation, and respect for the cycles of presence and use, sustaining continuity through subtle, ongoing adaptation. The elegance of this quiet tension becomes apparent. Life continues with minimal disruption, despite growing numbers and shifting resource use. Cycles of presence, care, and precedence repeat, teaching social cohesion and ecological awareness. Humans internalize rhythms of coexistence. Memory in the land and human behavior intertwines. Change is gradual, mediated by observation, repetition, and subtle negotiation, allowing both people and environment to maintain balance across generations. Over time, permanence, culture, and authority emerge naturally. Repeated acts of care, observation, and resource management create stability. Memory of past occupation informs new behavior. Land and humans co-create a system of soft governance, ecological awareness, and cultural continuity. Authority is subtle, cycles are respected, and social cohesion persists. Life is layered with precedent and care, guiding interactions without conflict, ensuring long-term sustainability and coexistence. The story of humans and land unfolds without end. Presence creates permanence, shaping behavior, culture, and ecology. Authority grows through observation, consistency, and respect. The environment teaches patience and stewardship silently. Life moves in gentle cycles of care and subtle assertion, with each generation learning, adapting, and adding to a landscape that remains resilient, ordered, and enduring. The script comes to a close. Thank you all for listening.